Sahana Bhavatu, Sahanao Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu, Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. There was a traveler who was wanting to go across a mountain range. He saw the mountain range. He wanted to see what's on the other side. He thought it was an interesting trek. But he's never been to the other side. He doesn't know the path. He's unfamiliar, what to expect. Unbeknownst to him are the dangers, the ways by which he could get sidelined, or all of the side sellers, you know, those little side sellers when you go up a mountain, they always have something to sell you. Like, give me a break, man. Just going up a mountain. No, 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 no. Come, come. You want some water? You want some this? You want some that? So he doesn't know any of this. However, on the path, the entrance to the mountain, he sees a map. He finds a map. And the map looks a little bit old and worn out, as if it's been handled by previous trekkers. And though it's a map that he doesn't know anything about, but he looks at this map and it's a map of the mountain and all of the paths that he will encounter, how to cross them, and what shortcuts to take, where to go, where not to go. And he realizes that this map is drawn by people just like him, who have walked the path, who have made errors and warned other fellow travelers where to go and what not to do. And he sees some messages by each prior traveler, such as the path. This path is hard, but continue, with an exclamation mark. The next message says, the bridge is narrow, but it looks stronger than it appears. The next message says, from this point forward, you will see the sun rise, a sight of hope. And so he looks at this carefully, and he considers these messages, and he sees that these are not pranks. These are real messages from travelers like him who have left a message after their long trek. And so he decides to take the route of this path, this map, and follow the instructions. And so as he starts to walk, he sees that there are symbols that he doesn't recognize. But he looks at the map and the symbol says, this symbol is safe. It means you're on the right path. And other symbols are in a foreign language, and he looks once again at the map, and it says, this is to be avoided. And so while he has no chance of verifying the instructions on the map, he still takes a leap of faith to go ahead, and he sees that the map is talking about some things that are not, not foreign. He sees the mountain, he sees the signs, and so he finds that this map is taking him farther and farther to where he really wants to go. And the more he discovers this, the more he trusts the map, because every time he sees the instruction and the instruction saves him, he actually says, wow, this map is really useful, thank you. So he figures out that sooner or later, what started out as an initial map that he had no way to verify, the more he saw those symbols and tracks that are already mentioned on the map, and he took that path of, as the map said, he trusted the map even more. And eventually he came to the other side. He was pleased by that, and he decided to go back. But in his journey, he also learned about a few things that were not on the map. So before he left the map in the same place where he picked it up from, he left his own messages for future trekkers like himself. And he said, there's a, like a, innocent looking surface, but it's quicksand. So avoid that. And so he walks on his journey. He came to see that what the map is talking about is exactly what his experience confirms. So Shraddha, we spoke about, it's not just a belief system. It's really just your attitude of life. It's what you fall back on. It is what you let yourself follow in those tough times. In fact, when there's a crisis or you want to know about, something that can help you, what is it that you fall back on when there is a time of crisis or, something's going on? Where do you look? What's the first thing that you open? Where's your source of map? What is that map? Wherever that is, that's where your Shraddha is in. And sometimes you'll be surprised. It's not even the Gita sometimes. It is a certain text, like a book on quotes by some person. Or the other times it's, well, it could be a self-help book. Other times it is your friend, or even a face that you have in your mind that you may not necessarily have a physical relationship with, but you have some connection with. So whatever comes to your mind in times of crises, that is where your Shraddha is. And so this map is this journey where we all start out with this vast, right, mountain range, and you just have no way of knowing where to go. Why should I go? What's on the other side? Is it safe to cross the mountain? But if there's one thing for sure, is you're not the only one who's trying to cross. That's where your faith is. In other words, there were many like you who too have seen the nuances of life, and they have undergone this journey way before you, and they have, right, sacrificed their time and their family and their health. But if there's one thing for sure, out of their empathy and compassion for the human race, they have left the map for us. So in that same way, you may not sometimes understand where this journey is or any journey is taking you, but if there's one thing that you can know for sure, there are people just like you who are smarter than you, who have dedicated their lives into finding out and clearing out the landmines so that you don't step on them, and that you can have faith in. In fact, when I was exposed to the Gita first time in my life, it was actually late. There's an advantage to this. I know that in the Indian tradition, on the Indian culture, you hear about the Gita from very early on. But this isn't always an advantage, because when the kids hear and when it's pushed upon them, then the parents won't even have the right context of the Gita. So because it's such a common word, when the child hears this Gita in adulthood, they're like, yeah, Gita, what about it? What is this? I heard this Krishna. I know, I'm an expert at this. I've been in this since 5. But actually, you haven't. You don't know anything. You just heard the words. You just heard Krishna and Mahabharata and Yudhishthira and so on. You just heard the words. When you have not heard about anything at all, you have no context, you have no prior experience, there's no prior reference, there's no judgment, there's neither bad or good. So first time I heard this, it was entirely based on faith. This is a book that is as good as any other book that I've seen, like Buddhist traditions. There were great books there too. But if there's one thing that allowed me to consume this book of the Gita so well that no letter was missed out, no full stop was left out, it was consumed from letter to letter, was that I knew that this book or the Upanishads, which is the source of the Gita, is written not by one person, but it's written by hundreds upon hundreds of rishis who have dedicated their life to mapping out the journey. And I reasoned that if they have collectively done this and have cross-referenced their knowledge with each other, then there must be a lot of wisdom to this, because people are smart. They will use their logic and their reasoning to find gaps in the teaching, and thus they will remove those gaps that do not make sense, that you cannot verify directly now. And so based on that reasoning alone, that this is an authoritative text written by those, or not written, but heard by those who have themselves a very, sophisticated ways of thinking, this must be super duper true. That was my reasoning. And so through this, I put my mind in a state of receptivity. That's what faith does to you. It makes your mind extremely receptive, that everything that's heard must be so true because it has so many wonderful, brilliant minds behind it. So I better listen and pay attention. And this attitude alone is all that one needs to learn anything. You don't need to have memory capacities or great logic. Just faith alone will take you farther than someone who's been hearing this since like 20 years. Thereby, faith is not an ordinary word. It is something that can take you across oceans of apparent difficulty. So this is the 39. However, then Krishna says, what if I don't have faith? What if I have the intellect, but I don't have the faith? What if I have all the right teachings, but I don't have the faith? What might the result be then? And so he says in verse 40, Ajnascha shraddadhanascha samshayatma vinashyati nayam lokosti naparaha nasukam samshayatmanaha.
One who has no discrimination and who has no faith in the Shastra and the teacher, and one who has a doubting mind persists. Because for the one with a doubting mind, this world is not there, nor the world beyond, nor happiness.
The one who has a doubting mind, the one who has no discrimination, the one who has no faith. What is the result for them? So let's look at it from this standpoint. Why do you think that the Gita is not very popular? And even if it is, it's not taken, as a means of knowledge, but rather as just a book on the table next to your bed. Why do you think that, even though it has the map laid out for you, why doesn't everyone take to the Gita? Why do you think?
Due to lack of faith.
And thereby they will put it aside. I've heard this before, kind of thing. It's too well known. Pankaj?
It is considered unfashionable to read scriptures in India. People want to read most modern books, and we want to leave out our scriptures.
I can think of two reasons. One is not understanding its value. The other is there's also at times at least in India, I've heard people saying, okay, hey, if you are interested in spirituality, that is something you do when you are retired. At end of life, you don't do it. Also, don't really get it that the benefit is now. It's not later.
In any culture, I don't think they base it off of any books in general. It's more about their resources and mining more of the resources itself, power, like, politics, finances. I don't think any real culture bases their ruling on a book in general. So Gita is no exception to that.
Andre, I also think two things. One, probably the seeker is not really a seeker as of now. Maybe they're not mature enough. And second, even if you're mature, there you need to have a grace, like God's grace, to be able to come into this company.
You'll come to the Gita when you're ready to. when life circumstances have kind of brought you to it and you're ready to accept it.
I'm sorry, I didn't unmute. Yeah, I agree with whatever the previous speakers have said. That is ancient text. So now we are in modern times. And secondly, it's written by ancient rishis. If you see in modern times, we are more inclined to believe in what Harvard University says or what the Westerners say. I mean, it's what the whites are saying. We have more tendency to believe in what they are saying than what black-skinned Indian people are saying, even though I am from Indian origin. So it's the tendency of the modern mind to think this way. And then even those who have started studying the Bhagavad Gita, there are many different interpretations. So they might not interpret it in, they might have their understanding, which is limited. You know, Sanskrit words have so many different meanings. It can be expanded to different to vast dimensions. But if we have limited knowledge, we will have a narrow mindset where we won't have the vast sight of what is really being said. Like we have so many interpreters who interpret it in different dimensions. And we don't have this knowledge. So it's difficult for the beginners to really see what is being said.
You know, it's really funny,
Thank
but
you.
the Indians, they think that Western knowledge is, superior. But the Westerners,
Yes.
this is where the advantage is. The Westerners, and I had this too, thought that the Indian knowledge is superior, which is why I, took on the Gita so much.
Indians give more value to the white skin than black skin. So it is rather unfortunate. Yeah.
I tell you, it's universal, right? The Indians want fairer skin, the Westerners want darker
Yeah.
skin. Oh man.
So they don't have the mind or the value system for it. I think people are caught up in samsara. They're caught up chasing materialism, thinking that that's what will bring them happiness. And then they also lack dispassion and discrimination.
Yeah. The setup, the environment is not there to support the text.
Hi, I was thinking that the reason it could be challenging for some people is because it requires self-inquiry. And I think maybe some people aren't ready to do that, or they think it's maybe not for them, or yeah, but I think it does require some looking at oneself.
Exactly. Absolutely.
And that can be challenging. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Not everyone's ready to look at that because we're more predisposed towards external rather than internal.
So there are three reasons that I can think of. The first one is the traditional way of how this knowledge was disseminated initially, like, the kind of education system that India was really adapted. That was systematically destroyed with successive invasions over 700 years. And their only target is to completely dismantle the intellectual position of India in matters related to spirituality and knowledge. And the faith, the deep-rooted faith, has to be destroyed with some sort of like a doubt, or like it's not being useful for their day-to-day life. So that has to be sowed in their minds. So that was the first reason. And with that, the outcome of that is, the second reason is basically the link was completely broken, where the context of setting up the teaching of like why Bhagavad Gita matters in your life, that was eliminated. So no context of esoteric meanings of like, what does it really mean? Like the battle of Kurukshetra, it is your own internal battle.
Yeah.
Many people don't even get that idea when they open the Bhagavad Gita. They don't even consider it is their own struggle.
Yeah.
Right. They just look at it as a story.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are Pandavas, there are Kauravas, someone was, doing something wrong, and then, but just looking at it as a story, but not getting that esoteric meaning.
Exactly.
Right. And no one to explain that. So that is why this is not automatic for Indians anymore. But the third point that I want to come to is exactly what your experience is. No matter who you are, there comes a time when one becomes really helpless. Nothing they touch, nothing matters. Like it doesn't really make any sense. That is like, it is all about the student. When the student is ready, Gita would automatically appear in their lives.
This is probably similar to or adjacent to other comments, but the verse itself seems to imply the doubting mind.
Yeah.
So that there in and of itself seems to encapsulate the reason why people might not refer to that or see that readily. And I can also perhaps add into that cultural aspect, maybe from a white Australian perspective, where something like the Bhagavad Gita is associated with things that aren't particularly valued or can be associated with things, or like a religion or some sort of dogma or something like this. So it might be not seen for that reason, not seen for what it is, for reasons that are acquired.
Let me give my take on it. Is knowledge an issue today? Has it really been an issue, knowledge? Because if I want to learn, even if I'm Indian, if I want to learn about time and space, I will take my time to research, and I'll come to Einsteinian theory of relativity, right? So knowledge is not really an issue at all. It's not the lack of knowledge that the Gita is not popular. If I want to learn something, I will seek it out and find it for myself. Doesn't matter where it is, to whom it belongs. Now, when knowledge of theory of relativity, can you call that Jewish knowledge? Because Einstein discovered it? Jewish knowledge. And the Gita is Indian knowledge. Yeah? No. Knowledge doesn't care whether an Antarctican discovered it, Peruvian, a Martian, because knowledge was there way before we even had the concept of India or the West. We had Pangaea, a big continent. It was just animals and creepy crawlies on the ground. Knowledge was there. So knowledge, first of all, doesn't belong to anyone. So now when someone comes over and claims that this is ours, then it sort of creates this compartment like, oh, this is Indian. That's not for us. That's for you guys. So that's the first issue. Not knowing that knowledge is a universal thing. There's no such thing as those compartments. That's the first one. The second, according to Krishna, is the absence of proper discrimination. And also what Ravikant brilliantly said is that though this book is in my possession, I open this book and I look at it literally. It's a war, right? A person actually had a chakra on his finger, spinning disc, and Ravan actually had 10 heads. You were actually, Arjuna, shooting all day long, 100,000 arrows. You know how tired your arm will be? It's impossible. So they look at it literally. And so it stays at this kind of a superficial conversation. It doesn't induce profound philosophical discussion. So it has no real value for people. Like, okay, great, there's a story. That's Indian story. And I don't need your story. For me, give me Peter Pan. Give me, the seven dwarfs and the...
Snow White.
Yeah, it's Snow White. This is our story, right? But if you look at the philosophical concept behind it, then it becomes immediately applicable universally. So this is the second issue, is that people take, on the first preview, they look at it as a story, and it stops there. And so it has no distribution value. Now, what Krishna says is that even the question, why is the Gita not popular, is irrelevant. Because you will find the Gita. It's not about others, whether they're finding the Gita or not. It's about you. If you are so attuned to the truth, you will find a way no matter what. Even before internet, you will ask someone is going to know about it. And then the word itself is going to trigger something in your mind, and you will walk over and you'll find and you get involved in whatever is required. So he says, do not disturb those who are still consumed with worldly passions or worldly ambitions or worldly faith, because everyone has faith, as we said. People got faith in money, in children, in cooking classes, in titles, in doctors. These are all wonderful things, and without them, we couldn't thrive as a society. So there's nothing wrong. He's not saying people are wrong to be pursuing to be a doctor. If there was no doctors, then what would you and I do? We would be in trouble. But he's saying that let them pursue, because that's where their minds are. The issue is at the bottom of all of the issues is lack of discernment, lack of nuanced thinking. And so he says then, what are these obstacles? And he says, samshayatma, dominated by doubt. When my mind is dominated by doubt, then when I listen to any teaching, even the Gita, then what will my mind do? What will it allow to be expanded, or will it try to take that vast knowledge and shrink it to the size of the mind? If my mind is dominated by doubt and lack of faith, it will shrink it. That's what the mind, which doesn't discern, does. It looks at any model that you give it, and it says, how do I fit this in my existing models that I've already heard before? This is a big obstruction for most. And so they're not able to just let their mind say, hey, what am I here for? To try to fit Advaita or whatever school it is into what I've already heard before, or let this knowledge expand my mind even further. Which one is it for you? In this class, I bet it is the second one. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Therefore, the first thing we need to accept, verbally acknowledge, is that let my mind, let me, rather than doubting this knowledge, may the Lord give me the strength for my mind to keep on expanding and be available for more knowledge to flow in. Let it be like a cup that's never full. In fact, a doubting mind is like a cup full. Whatever you put in pours out. Let my mind be like a cup full that's not full, but half full, so that more knowledge can come in. And the more knowledge come in, the more it lets me be transformed at every level. Tell me, how do you become a doubter? I doubt the Gita. I doubt this knowledge. I doubt that this is true. What makes you doubt something? Lack of discrimination. But then why am I not using my discrimination? Because I don't have faith. You see the connection? If I don't have faith in the knowledge, then why should I apply my discrimination? Because I'm not going to surround myself with knowledge in the first place. So if you don't have viveka, suppose you don't have discriminative capacity, but you have Shraddha. This is wonderful. You know why? Because if you don't have viveka, but you have Shraddha, then by the mere virtue of having Shraddha, you will stay long enough and listen. And when you listen to something that is uncomfortable, what does that equate to? What does discomfort equate to? But you stay. When you exercise, there's discomfort. When you want to develop some physical strength, there's discomfort. But it results in progress. So when you have faith and you stay in something, even though it's uncomfortable, you are actually developing your viveka. So it doesn't matter that someone comes to the Gita who lacks viveka. As long as one has Shraddha, that Shraddha alone will make one stay long enough. And the more they listen, the more they will get challenged. The more you get challenged, the more uncomfortable you get, because it's not keeping with what you're used to thinking before. Everyone likes the comfort zone. The more you stay with that feeling of discomfort, the more the knowledge lets be worked in your mind, and the more it reshuffles all your neurons, and slowly, slowly, you're able to start to think more in line with a discerning person like Krishna. Let's do another approach. You have viveka, but you don't have Shraddha. So you have discernment, capacity to logically think, but you don't have faith. How might this be for you when the Gita arrives into your life, or any kind of teaching arrives into your life?
A thought that has been coming up for me is that, we have a difficult time holding two opposing thoughts in the same time. And that feels related to not being able to process any text like this and seek the truth, because part of it is being able to see, yes, something is not making sense. One is time this is saying this particular thing, I'm hearing this. How do I hold these two things together? Our mind's desire is to, it's deeply uncomfortable, so we want to reconcile and have like some certainty to be saying, well, okay, this is right based on what we know, but not being able to just sit with it, I feel like is part of it. I don't know how you think about this.
What I heard is that if you do hold two opposing thoughts, well, number one, it's going to be uncomfortable because, you know, it's very hard to bear two opposing thoughts. But that's why we have the buddhi. So the buddhi is always it's never going to stop trying to reconcile two opposing thoughts. So if one teacher tells you your mind is to be silenced, don't use your mind, and another teacher says use your mind, those are two opposing thoughts. Now what Vedanta says is use your mind. That's what Vedanta says, use your mind. But then you come from, no, the mind needs to be thoughtless. You know, I need to be in a mode of thoughtlessness. Those are two opposing thoughts, aren't they? So now what do I have to do to convince you that one is, because you can't have two truths. There's only one truth. You can't have the, you know, sun both rising and not rising. It's either not rising or it's rising. So what I have to do is now tell you the mind is not to be silenced. And you say, how do you prove that? Thought doesn't oppose awareness. You can still have a thought, but the thought is always evident to I. That means the thought has not displaced I. So there's no point of making your mind thoughtless because the thought doesn't displace, or absence of thought doesn't displace awareness. And I say to you, that awareness to whom a thought is evident, that's the real you. And you go, so it doesn't matter whether I have thoughts or not, whether I'm using my mind or not, because it doesn't displace, it doesn't push me aside. And I say, exactly. So now that means you can still have as many thoughts as you want, but it doesn't touch you. So the whole point of this is to start out with two contradicting views. That's why you need to bring forward your view in the light of what Vedanta says. Vedanta says the mind is not to be kept silent. If you want to keep it silent, that's your thing. That's wonderful. But the very instrument that gets you out of ignorance is the mind. And I need to use that instrument. I need to sharpen that instrument up to think what I'm seeing, because I'm always seeing. My eyes are always open. How can I have thoughtlessness if my eyes are always open? Just to open your eyes, you have thoughts about the world. So if I have thoughts about the world, what I need to do is now that the world has entered vritti in my mind, it's a thought mode, what do I do with that thought mode? I can't just kind of push it aside and say, no, just remaining thoughtlessness. I need to see that vritti in the mind is a vritti. And that vritti does not oppose intelligence. Wherever there's a vritti, that's exactly where Ishvara is. And wherever Ishvara is, that's exactly where awareness is. So you say, so no matter what thought I have, let the mind flow in any direction. Because what is Param Shantim last week? It is when you're able to let your mind roam anywhere. Have any kind of thought. And it doesn't bother you at all. Why? Because that thought, number one, is not mine. Number two, wherever the thought is, that's exactly where I will find Ishvara, obtaining as that thought. And wherever Ishvara is, that's exactly where I am as the observer of that thought. And then you say, I understood now. I understood why keeping the mind silent or not keeping it silent has no effect on me. And thus your doubt gets resolved.
More nuanced understanding resolves them.
Then, yeah, so you start out with the black or white. Either it's like this, my mind is used, or my mind is not used. And then the teacher says, use your mind in some cases, like in empirical, you need to negotiate and get things done. On the other cases, you just want to rest your mind and give it some break. But whether it is used, whether it is unused, both do not touch you. So now we started out with black or white, use or don't use, and then we added two more aspects. We said, use it or don't use it, depending on the situation. That's aspect number one. Aspect number two, it doesn't displace who you are. So two aspects have been added from the original use or don't use. So this is called nuanced thinking. You're adding dimensions of thoughtfulness in respect to what you're experiencing. And now the student says, wow, thank you for relieving me. Now I can use my mind and I don't have to feel guilty. No longer do I say, oh, I'm using my mind, therefore I'm not spiritual. So now the teacher has added freedom just by the knowledge alone, just by showing you the logic that it's okay to use or not to use your mind.
And student has not blindly selected one or the other. He actually has a better understanding.
We simply put things in the right place. We didn't negate anything. We just said, here's the place of thoughtlessness and here's the place of thoughtfulness. Both have a place in this order because you did not create this order. Nobody designed this. It is already designed. So my job is to recognize what already is and align myself with it. This is why we said knowledge is vastu tantram. Knowledge is a matter of seeing what already is. There is a thought, and I simply say, now that there is a thought, where is the place of thoughts and where is the place of no thoughts? So the discerning mind is not removing things, is not adding things, but is looking at what is. Whereas an undiscerning mind, non-discerning mind, what do they say? There's a thought, no, do positive superimposition. You know, if it's a snake, you know what they do? They say, no, put a golden chain around the snake, embellish it with some necklaces. That's called positive thinking. What is the other side? Negative thinking. If there's a snake, then you add labels onto the snake. What is Vedantic thinking? It says there is a snake. It's your projection. It's your biases. Now let's talk about what is the substratum upon which that snake depends upon. So this removing pratibhasika mithya, and I want to get to vyavaharika mithya. Thereby, the first step is removing my subjectivities and seeing the rope. Now, when you're at the rope and you can appreciate the vyavaharika, the empirical world, I can now work with it. I'm no longer just sort of saying, oh, I need to kill the snake. I need to beat the snake. Is there a snake? So this is what we do. The world is a snake to me, and what am I doing? I'm attacking the government. I'm attacking the people. I'm attacking the family because everyone for me is a snake. But there's no such thing as a snake. What I need to do is family has their place. They're on their own journey. It's not my job to tell them to follow my path. Hey, I've discovered Advaita, come over. It's not my job to do that. Thereby, when you come to vyavaharika mithya, then you are now available to investigate what is the truth of that rope. And now you begin the inquiry. The rope itself is just yarn. The yarn itself is atoms. The atoms themselves are particles. The particles themselves are just mere probabilities. It's like throwing a dice in the air, and it's got six sides to it. Is that probability? Is that a physical thing? Probability, the fact that it can land on any number? The dice is spinning now, and it's going to land on one of those sides, and it's going to give you a number on the top. Is that a physical thing? Probability? Can you photograph a probability? Can you weigh a probability? And yet probabilities make up quarks, which make up particles, which make up atoms. So it's a huge deal. Depending upon what probability takes place, everything upwards, the quark, the atom, the rope, the yarn, the rope, everything else will change based on the probability. So you started out with something very dense, physical, rope, and you came all the way down to the smallest tangible, the last tangible that scientists can measure, which is a quark. But then a quark itself is made of just probabilities. But probabilities, how do you measure that? Because it hasn't even occurred. How do you measure which number is going to come while this dice is still spinning? Can you do that? So the world that you consider physical is just probabilities. You don't even know what even thought is going to arise out, in 5 minutes from now. So what the Vedanta teaching does, it lets you see that this mere world of physicality, including thoughts, their physical thoughts, is nothing but concepts. And those concepts are not outside of awareness, because you cannot have a concept which is intelligently putting itself together unless it's in the presence of a conscious being. Thereby, that's called nuanced thinking. So you're going layer, 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 layer. Instead of starting with physical, have thought, have no thought. Engage in a fight or don't fight.
So are thoughts something related to sounds? because it feels like some sound has been happening inside the mind. So can we relate thoughts to sounds?
A very good point. In fact, every thought is it's triggered, is generated by the input of sound. So sound is slightly more dense than a thought because it's merely just vibrations of air, frequencies. And then they really just vibrate your hairs in the ear. And those hairs generate electrical impulses. So it's like the hair goes like this. Zzz, zzz, zzz. And that's what your brain hears. It generates a kind of a thought, but it's a different nature of a thought than a form. A form has a more of a image to it. A sound is another form, but it is of a sound. We just call it a sound form, a taste form. If I put a lollipop on your tongue, you will have another, kind of a thought generated, but it will be a taste thought. So they're all thoughts of different nature. They're all called vrittis, modes of the mind, which present different kind of, or generate a different kind of experience. And thus you say, I am experiencing the world in a sight. In fact, your waking state is only as good as the senses that are working. Suppose that you're born colorblind. Okay, we're all born colorblind. And somebody designs a pill to bring color back. So look at this. Here you are, colorblind, for 20 years. You take a pill and suddenly color comes back. Or same with the sound. You take a pill and suddenly sound, you hear that small, small in the background. You start to hear sounds for the first time. And suddenly you hear sounds. So there was no color, now I see color. There was no sound, and I suddenly see sound. So what happened to your experience of the world? It suddenly took on a new dimension. Color was missing, color came. Sound was missing, sound came. This means the potential for the sound was there, potential for the color was there, but owing to the senses, which are not able to pick that data up, they were not able to create that, help you generate that new experience. So the point is, no matter what experience is generated, does the witness of that experience get affected in any way? That means even the senses do not define who you are. You're the observer of your sight. You're the observer of the sound. Because one moment I am, no color, no sound. Take the pill, next moment I still am, but now there's color and there's sound. So the only difference was in reference to the instrument, not to the observer of the instrument.
Yeah, it was close because I was thinking, why are these thoughts so noisy? Maybe because it is also some kind of vibration. So mind is constantly vibrating because it's thoughts, and it's somewhat, it looked like it's related to sound because sound has vibration. So I was thinking maybe my mind is constantly moving up and down. So how should I relate, and how should I be not bothered? It's, as you said, eyes will see. It's use. Because of consciousness, eyes can see. So because of consciousness, I'm able to see this nature of the mind. So the nature of the mind is to keep going like that.
It is. So all we're doing is putting two categories. One of them is an instrument, anatma. The instrument is seeing sights, not seeing sights, seeing color, not seeing color, hearing sounds. So they're all modes, 5 different modes that the mind can go through. If you close your eyes and you're ill, you know how your taste and smell goes out completely? So we know that I can be without taste and smell for sure. But if you suppose you're in a dark room and all you hear is just hum or om in the background, then you're experiencing the world minus sight, minus taste, minus smell, and minus sight. You're only experiencing the world full of sound. So this means your mind is now, quote, vibrating in your language in a form of a sound. It's a mode of the mind, mode of sound. Now, suddenly a light comes on and then appearances form. So now your mind not only vibrates in the form of sound, that which represents sound, but it also takes the form of image. So now your mind is taking two modes, sound mode and image mode. And that gives you an experience that there's a world of sight and there's a world of sound. So these five senses is the means by which the world is experienced in the waking state. And that's how you experience the world in the waking state, through your five senses. And the degree to the well-being or the capacity of these senses working is a degree to how much your waking state is restricted. If your eyes are totally shut down, then you're still experiencing the waking state, just one state of the three, by the way, but minus the forms. There's a great analysis in the Mandukya Upanishad where, you see, all of this conversation is going on where? In what state is this going on? In the waking state. So everything we discuss is in the waking state. The curious person is in a waking state. The teacher is in a waking state. The personality is in a waking state. You're sort of, listening to this in the waking state. The sights and the sounds and the modes and the mind and the thoughts are in the waking state. So all questions you ever ask are in reference to just one of the three states. And then when the dream comes, the whole thing, the whole world that you asked about and the modes of, sights and sounds, all of that becomes irrelevant because now your senses are shut down, but your mind, by its own projecting power, is creating its own world. And then the mind creates the world, which once again, now you open your eyes and your senses are working and you say, wow, what an amazing world. What a magnificent world. Although there is one advantage with the physical waking. You know what it is? It's one unique state where everyone, because it's a universal generation, it's Ishvara's creation. So here you're forced to get along with others. And because you're forced, you need to learn about how to mature yourself up. If you are in the dream, you don't need to learn Dharma at all. Because if someone's doing something bad to you, you just make them disappear. You don't need to learn about ethics. You don't need to learn about, patience in your dream, because your own mind is, you can do whatever you want. Now, in your dream, you're discussing all these, having all these thoughts. And once again, it's as real to you as is the waking. And you're equally convinced, you're equally immersed in the dream, equally fearful of the dream. And like once again, the dream disappears and then the deep sleep state comes and the whole world disappears. The waking is gone. All the discussions in the waking that you've ever had have no meaning. All the dream that you've experienced has no meaning. Now there's just undifferentiated potential, nothing. And then until next morning, again, a new waking state comes. And then again, you say, I am this person who's now going to ask a question in the waking state. So all these three states are like stacked up together, like balls of three. 3, 3, 3, 3. And you think you are one of the persons in the waking state. That for you becomes real. And so you speak about, you marry in the waking, you worry about the waking people, you're arguing with the waking people, you're studying the waking world, you're observing the waking sun, you're teaching waking objects, you're so stressed out to attain to be someone in this waking state. And it's really concerning, right? And then you marry, what about my children? And you're totally immersed in one state that in a 15-hour state you take to be totally real. And you even say, let me attain moksha in this waking state. I want waking state moksha, right? So every waking state becomes about a pursuit for moksha and studying philosophies and comparing philosophies in the waking state. And then the dream comes, the whole thing disappears, poof. And now the world of the dream is so convincing to you that you have no connection to the waking, and you see someone in your dream and you say, I kind of recognize you, but I don't know why. That's of course because I have no access to the waking state. So I kind of recognize you, but I can't explain why. This is how karma works, by the way. I recognize you. You're familiar. This is familiar to, but I can't explain why, because I don't have access to my past life. So besides the point, you're in this dream and you're having a great time. and you're worried and you're concerned, but all those worries and concerns have zero connection to the worries and concerns of the waking state. And so once again, your world is as real as ever before. You're striving, you're dying, you're waking up. Sometimes you even dream within a dream state. Did you ever dream and you woke up and you're still in a dream? This is amazing, right?
Andre, I fell asleep with a consciousness show, scientists talking about consciousness, and they not quite getting it. Like, they don't quite go as far, and they're sort of still looking at the physical. This is just last night, and in my dream, I was frustrated because I felt like I had no voice, and I was going, but it's not that. It's not that. You're just. I was frustrated, and then when I woke up, I thought, oh my gosh, it's the TV. They're still talking about it.
Wow. Look at
So
that.
in my dream, I was dreaming of that show because I could hear them talking. So you must be able to still hear things when you're dreaming.
Yes.
There must be some input that's still coming through.
That's how people can wake you up, by the way. So you're still in some ways connected.
But I must have been listening to it in my dream because I was trying to comment and I couldn't comment.
Actually, last night I had a dream so vivid. I was actually learning from my teacher. He was right next to me. He was reading from a book, excerpts from his book, and I was just enjoying, like, oh, what's this? Like, tell me about your life. Tell me about your autobiography of your life. And I was just having a Vedanta class last night. It was wonderful. You live in Spain, because I know my teacher lives in Spain, right? What are you doing here in Australia? Right? So there was a connection because the memory get passed over from the waking to the dream. But you do not know, you have no connection to the waking. So you're asking, what are you doing in Australia? You can't say, well, that's because, you sort of, you're in my dream. You can't say you're in my dream because you don't know it's a dream. For you, it's real. And so suppose you stay in that dream as long as you stay in the waking state. And so you now say, oh, so therefore the dream is real. So let's study things of the dream. Let's ask dream questions. Let's ask dream philosophies. Let's compare on dream AI. And it's like totally real for you. And then you wake up in the waking. Suppose waking lasts only 3 hours. Suppose the waking is like a dream. Suppose this state right now is like a dream. If that makes you question, which one is a dream, right? Is it this one or is it the dream? And then you go, oh, okay, I choose by the mere virtue of this dream being a lot more kind of universal, a lot more grounded. On the basis of that alone, I choose that this state for me is going to be more real than the dream. But it's not. If all three states are changing, then there has to be a knower of all three. And that knower has to be thus other than those three. And that knower is the real you. Therefore, because the waking person, I can speak about the dream, but I'm not in the dream. I can speak about the waking, but I'm not in the waking. So the states individually have no connection to each other. But the fact that in the waking, there is one underlying consciousness in the presence of whom you're able to relate to the waking, relate to the dream, relate to the sleep, must mean thus that that underlying substratum is through and through all states. Therefore, that underlying substratum, that consciousness, is the real you. So this is a discussion for the Mandukya Upanishad. Going back to the verse, so far we have seen what are these obstacles. Why is the Gita not popular? Why are the Upanishads not popular? Why is philosophy not popular? Simply because the mind is still observing the worldly objects, and it's preoccupied with worldly items. If you have Shraddha, but you don't have Viveka, there's no problem. I'm not worried about you because you will stay, you will listen, and slowly the mind will get stretched out. But if you have Viveka, but you don't have Shraddha, what might that do for you?
Is it possible that with Viveka, it's really about discrimination and a system of logic? Like there's plenty of great systems out there in terms of logic and being able to describe things. Without Shraddha and the faith in the Pramana, and that the Pramana will achieve moksha, then there's a likelihood that you may get bored and switch, or alternatively, if your life's kind of completely rosy and everything's going well, you might just drop it and find something else.
Yeah, I would
Keep
also
your mind occupied.
but I'll also expand upon that. If you do have Shraddha, if you do have Viveka, but no Shraddha, then what's going to happen is you might, your so-called dispassion will actually, we won't have dispassion towards different schools. You'll be very passionate about your school. So people who, see, Krishna says you need both Viveka and Vairagya, dispassion. Those are they always go together. Now, if you only have Viveka, then what happens is, what I end up doing is I end up protecting what I already know. I use the logics to support neuroscience, how consciousness is in the brain. I use my logics, my brilliant logics, to support an erroneous notion. This is how great books get written, and they just keep on building up, taking this, starting out with a wrong assumption, because I'm so passionate about my system that then my own intellect ends up building and making even larger and bringing communities that there Shraddha has no place anymore. Because like, who needs Shraddha? Who needs faith in different systems? I already got my system. I already have my brilliant, community of scientists. So I don't need Shraddha. So if you have Viveka, but you don't have Shraddha, what you end up doing is you become very passionate towards one philosophy, one school of thought. You're now very closed-minded, highly intellectual, but closed-minded to expanding your mind. You need Brahma Sutra for people like this. You need to give them extreme loads of logics because they lack this Shraddha. It's like, I don't believe in Lord Krishna and reincarnation and rebirth. You need to give me logic. Show me, prove logically there is rebirth. And then the student and then the teacher has to say, well, if you look at any object in this world, can you find a cause that suddenly ends for 80 years, a cause that only lasts 80 years? Because you look at the world and you cannot find a beginning to anything. Without the father, there's no son. Without the son, there's no father. Without the chicken, there's no egg. Without the egg, there's no chicken. So look at anything in this universe and you cannot find a first beginning to anything. Even your own body is based on the genes of your grandparents. You don't see your grandparents, but your genes are the grandparents' genes are in your body right now. So now when it comes to the subtle body, which we call the jiva, the traveling jiva, the subtle body, suddenly that no longer applies just because you can't see it. Find me one thing in this universe, including personality, that suddenly begins for the first time ever without a preceding cause. That's why some get born with an unexplainable confidence in some particular area, and yet their parents don't inherit that. Nobody in their family inherited that, and they just come with a natural ability to understand mathematics. Somebody else doesn't. Then you get born with a natural ability to relate with music and touch people's hearts with music because you come with that ability. So there's a passover. And then you can go through 5 more logics to prove reincarnation. But besides the point, if you have faith, I don't need to hear your logics. Okay, there's reincarnation. There's a continuity of life. I will take that on board and I will use that to help me to explain why you can have a baby born who dies. If I cannot explain that, then the only reason I can do is attribute that to the Lord and say, Lord is cruel. When I heard about reincarnation, I didn't need any logics. I just said, okay, yeah, I take that on board. It's a wonderful idea. It explains why I am the way that I am, even though I can't explain why I am the way that I am. It explains why people go through, they get born in, in families that are not so, healthy. Others get born in families that are healthy. It's easy. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful model to help you explain the world where everything is a continuity. But not everyone is like this. Yeah. So therefore, if you have Viveka and you have Shraddha, you are going to go like this in an upwards trajectory. If you have Viveka, but no Shraddha, then the only thing that can help you is time. You have to let that person go through their own journey. And slowly, slowly, they will see that what I'm believing, what I'm protecting is not making sense. There are some gaps. In fact, look at this. My brother, he is a Christian right? So when I tell him about Vedanta, the first thing that I hear is you're going to hell because you don't believe in Jesus. What else to expect, right? But of course, I understand because I was like this too. So you're going to hell. You need to believe in Jesus. Everything else is just there to trick you, to take you away from Jesus, and you know you're going to go downhill. For a long time, he didn't believe in reincarnation because that's not the thing that's popular in Christian tradition. But I know my brother very well. I knew it's only a matter of time before because he is a thinker, before his intellect starts to eventually say there is reincarnation. Now, the other day, I've been talking to him, and suddenly, yeah, you know, you also have to consider reincarnation, Andre. Like, where did this come from? In fact, what I really said in my mind was, told you, it was about to happen. And you know what's going to happen next? Is going to go into Buddhism, guaranteed. Because you know your family so well that you know exactly the next, because you've been through that rung of the ladder. You've been through no incarnation, Christianity, Buddhism, Every ladder you've been through, you know exactly where the person's at, which is why those who are on the lower rung of the ladder, they will always have a problem with you because they're not there yet. But if you're at the top of the ladder, no matter what rung of the ladder you listen to, you exercise empathy because you have been there yourself, which is why Advaitins have a problem with Advaita. You know, you Mayavadis, you know, you believe everything's illusion. But when I hear this, I'm like, I just laugh it off. I'm like, oh man, I'm literally listening to myself about 15 years ago. And you know exactly where they're at, what they're thinking, and what they're going to think next. So the beauty of Vedanta is it establishes you so high up in your understanding that you simply understand, you're able to put things in the right place. You have no problems with anything because everything's just a ladder getting you to the final vision.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, like they said, Michael and all. So if you have just discrimination but no faith, then it might become just an intellectual, academic pursuit. You will take it like an ordinary knowledge. You might do a PhD, but as you said in the beginning, it's a means of knowledge. It's a pramana. It's like a map. You follow the map and then uncover and discover it for yourself. But you don't need to learn the map. Hey, why left, why right, why this? You don't have to mug up the map. You just need to use the map, follow the map, uncover, discover it for yourself, and then leave the map. Yeah.
Just keep thinking like if it's even possible for somebody to have real viveka, like they can discriminate between real and unreal, and at the same time have no Shraddha, because if the person is able to see the real, how can they not have any Shraddha at all? Shraddha is having some, like being able, like it's like settling in that, there's some truth there, right? So I'm just grappling with how can they have no? I mean, it might be little, but how can they have none?
Yeah, so they may not call it Shraddha, but just to, you know, provisionally accept that there might be something called real and unreal implies that there's a part of me that trusts the teaching. So you cannot really come to the teaching of discriminating real and unreal. Why not? Because I've been holding on to the unreal for all my life. And now to suddenly say, you know, I accept that there's something called unreal and I'm that which is other than that. I'm free of the unreal. That takes a huge amounts of Shraddha, actually. Whether the person calls it faith or not. You can call it a lot of logic, a lot of pain, a lot of exhaustion from having seen everything else. It doesn't work anymore. So you really have no choice but just to accept the final thing that comes to you. Path of no choice. When you have no choice, that's still Shraddha. You still have Shraddha in the last remaining path. So what Krishna wants to show you is you cannot go without Shraddha. Everyone has faith in something.
If you have Vivek, and if you don't have Shraddha, what will happen is that you will keep wandering, you will keep changing your paths. And finally, you may not settle on any path because you don't have Shraddha. I mean, unless God himself exposes himself to you, only then you will believe. Then you will never believe because everyone is not Arjuna who will see the Lord himself. You have to have faith in something to grow.
Excellent, excellent. So what you
if
will
you
use,
don't have Shraddha, then you don't grow.
yeah, excellent. So you will use your Viveka to dissect teaching, to break it down, but I don't really believe that it can help me. So therefore, when I dissect it, I've conquered it, and I'll move on to something else, and I will apply the same principle, but it's not really going to stick. Brilliant. So once again, what Pankaj said is, if you have viveka, you don't have faith, then you will be in this mode of his constant seeker. Intellectual seeker, but a seeker nevertheless.
What's the role of the guru? Because I think you can have Vivek and Vairagya, but the guru plays an enormous role in that Shraddha. If you land up with the wrong guru, trust me, it's never going to unfold itself. And you can have tons of Bhagavad Gita and Advaita Vedanta books at home, but unless the guru really manifests in your life at the right time, things won't talk to you.
The guru that you have is the guru that you are attuned to in the stage of life that you're at. Now, some people may say, I've been with the guru who has taught me, but I haven't really been transformed. Then I wouldn't really say that there's anything wrong with you or the guru. It's just that both of you were aligned. There's a certain dynamic between the two of you that for you, from your standpoint, it didn't allow you any real growth. Now, that's not true for somebody else. Somebody else is there who's actually in with that same guru, and they're having a great time. They're growing every single day. But everyone at some point comes to us and says, I need more, right? There's some point when the student overtakes the teacher. Yeah, this is important. Now, when that happens, you know it. Because you master the teacher's words, you master their way of thinking. You still like their examples and their ways of talking, but there's something about you that says, I've reached the cap. I want more. But the guru is not able to give you to that point anymore because they're just teaching, right? They're doing their part. And that's the part or journey where you have to take that course, change of course in the mountain. Yeah, so the part that the guru plays is the one who talks to you at your level, starts at your level, and then takes you farther up.
In Shraddha, right? I think in Shraddha, the guru plays a huge role to make you gain that Shraddha.
You start out with a relative amount of Shraddha. The more the guru speaks to you and your life gets genuinely transformed by the help of the Shastra and the guru, the more you build Shraddha in the teacher and the teaching. Shraddha is not something you can buy. It's something that gets developed. The teacher's trust is earned. It's not bought. It's not forced. The more the teacher helps you and you reflect on your life and you relate to the language and you see that you're thinking in the light of the teacher's mind, the more your faith in the teacher and the teaching grows.
So you have to start on a level of faith. You must have this before teaching starts. Then it grows as you study with your teacher, guru, whoever it is, right?
Yeah. And
this is what you mean?
And it also fluctuates sometimes. And there's a point where it's self-sustaining, where you don't need a teacher for it to grow. It grows in you. This is where you're truly independent. You don't even need the guru anymore. The guru did your part. You love them, but you are unstoppable. You're on a self-sustaining journey. And that's when you know you really are, nothing can stop you anymore. So everyone gets to that point eventually. Yeah. In fact, even if you're at that point, still, owing to your love for knowledge and your nidhatyasana, you will still continue to listen to the guru. It's not like I've transcended the guru, therefore stop listening. You will still do it. I still listen to my teacher every week. Why? Because her words are so soothing to me.
Hi. So about the conversation you had, I think probably what Chinmaya is telling is you have Shraddha towards the guru more than Shraddha towards the guru more than the philosophy or the teaching. So, but I had a question. So you spoke about the consciousness in 3 states, the one unchanging consciousness that knows all the 3 states. So, and we experience that. So, are we the consciousness that is experiencing all the 3 states right now? Because we all know that, we woke, we dreamt, we slept. So when I say we, and that is consciousness?
It can only be one I. And in this example, I wouldn't say we, I would stick to first person, singular, I. So to whom are the three states known? The answer is to me, to the one that the three states are evident. To whom are the three states evident? You have to say to me, to I. That I, whatever you want to call that I, that is consciousness. Okay. Now we only verbalize it and we say it's I, but you don't need to say I to know that you are, always conscious.
And in the last lesson, you taught about Keno Upanishad, that line, we know Brahman, I know Brahman and I don't know Brahman. So we can say, I know Brahman because I know my three states. Can we relate that to this or no?
This brilliant student said, I cannot say that I know Brahman. I also cannot say that I don't know Brahman. What that means is that I cannot say that I know myself as another object, like a title, like, a man or a woman. It's a thing that appears in time. I'm not a man until I think that I'm a man. I'm not a woman until I think that I'm a woman, right? So there's never a time that you need to think that in order for you to know that you are, right? Whether thinking happens or it doesn't happen, you are irrespective. You know that you exist and you're awareful. That is an unverbalized truth. You don't need to verbalize that. It's an unspoken, unverbalized, non-negatable reality about you. So there's something about you that you cannot negate, and that is you, your awareness and your existence. So on one hand, I cannot say that I know it because, number one, I don't need to say that I know it. It's evident to me. But when I say I know it, I convert that whole truth into a thought. You see, you only know thoughts. You cannot know that because of which the thought is illumined, because it is self-revealing. You are self-revealing to yourself. So you don't need to say that you know yourself. You already know yourself all the time. So I cannot say that I know Brahman, because to know Brahman is to say that it's an object of knowledge. It's an object, right, known to whom? It's known to me. So again, I don't need to say that I know Brahman because it's evident. But I also can't say that I don't know Brahman because I'm evident to myself. It's pretty evident that I'm evident, right? You don't need to tell me that I'm evident to myself.
Yeah, is Shraddha something that cannot be developed? Like, I was gonna ask that, okay, how can I develop Shraddha? But I'm hearing that Shraddha is not something I develop, but it gets developed.
Yeah, so Shraddha is, as I said to Silma, it is as you spend time in the teaching, and the teaching helps you, and you allow yourself for the teaching to expand your mind, and you actually practice the teaching, you see that it's working more and more for you, right? Slowly. It's not a big hit or anything. It's just a very slow, gradual impact, right? And you, by that, see that the teaching is working for me. Therefore, through that means alone, your Shraddha starts to increase. So it is a time, it's developed through time and efforts. Because if you don't allow yourself and give yourself a positive affirmation that I'm going to at least see this, right, for myself and let this change me, then you're not going to have a chance to develop the Shraddha in the first place. Therefore, effort.
Okay, so
Shraddha.
So I can put, from my part is putting effort into the teachings and seeing, okay, hey, is this working for me or not? And then that will result in organically the Shraddha developing, or me going somewhere else where I find that.
For example, maybe a real life example. So if you're being hurt, or someone's having a dumping their stuff onto you, then according to the Gita, it says it's not about you. It's because the person's operating from their own pressures and their own pain and their own conditioning. And then you see, well, I'm also doing it. When I'm having a problem with somebody else, it's really more about me than it's about them, isn't it? It's really about my own intolerance for a certain personality or a person's way of talking. Maybe they've got a raspy voice or whatever it is. It's really about me, if you're honest. So if it's about me, then I can also say it's about the other person. And then you say, well, this is the teaching. The teaching is not saying something that's foreign to me. It's saying something that I can relate with directly. And then you say, so if that's true, what else is true? So I've developed more trust towards the teaching now because it's pointing out what I'm already experiencing. I just haven't thought it through very well. Yeah. So thereby, effort leads to Shraddha. Shraddha leads to the teaching becoming even more effective for you because you get persuaded
Right.
that it's good for you.
Right. Yeah, no, I thank you. I really appreciate this. I have at times struggled. At one point, I was studying with somebody, and what I heard was that, okay, hey, I don't have Shraddha, as in like came across almost like an accusation, you know, and I felt like, okay, I want to have that. So, you know, I had I felt like messed up and I had difficult time working, but I really appreciate, okay, hey, there is some insight I can still look into it, like, which is the effort. Am I putting effort, you know?
Exactly. Point is, I can say to you, you don't have memory. Okay, great. I'm going to develop memory. You don't have, you know, etiquette at a table, at a dinner table. Okay, thank you for letting me know. I'm not going to go home and develop etiquette. You don't have Shraddha. Okay, then I will, you know, do the best I can to help the teaching, you know, to have the teaching help me, and Shraddha will develop for me. So anything that a person or a teacher ever says you don't have, what they're really saying behind those words is you can therefore develop it through your effort. It's much more useful to say than you don't have.
Yeah, no, yeah, I do find that much more practical. Okay, what can I do? Because that time I did not know, okay, hey, what do I do about this? And I felt really bad. And like I feel a little more empowered with this.
Yeah, I get these restrictive teachings. It's like saying you don't have the memory of all the Upanishads. Some people believe you first need to memorize the Upanishad before you can study the Upanishad. That's a self-imposed limitation. That's not a restriction in other people's lives. It's like, go and study, understand the Upanishad through a teacher. When you understand, then if you want to memorize it, go ahead, by all means, memorize it. But the funny thing is, by then you'll realize how useless it is to memorize it. Because it was never meant to be memorized, it was meant to be understood. You see the reversal there? Okay, next week we will finish chapter 4 and we will revise all chapters. So next week will be important to bring it all together. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti